Welcome to everyone out there on YouTube and LinkedIn again. We're here to bring you another episode of our Top Innovator Series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and the brilliant minds behind them. My name is Joseph Martens, I'm your host, and I'm excited to introduce our guest today. With us today is Marty Smith. Marty is a fractional CIO and CTO. He has been the CIO of FinSync, and he held several other tech executive roles, including for Goldman Sachs, LexisNexis, and Home Depot. And fitting for our topic, he is also a prolific author on the topic of leadership. Marty, it's absolutely awesome to have you here in our conversation today.
Good morning, Joseph. How are you? Great to meet you. Great to be on your podcast.
Excellent. So leadership's the topic. Let's dive right into it. I would love to hear about your leadership's journey and especially about where you think the success is coming from. So when you think of your journey and look for the ingredients to what made you successful, what do you think are your success strategies?
I think you go back to the early days when I first started in working as a young adult. I started in the restaurant business. And as you know, with restaurant, it's customer service, right? And so you really have to learn how to interact with people, right? You have to understand the dynamics. You have to recognize the body language. You have to recognize those signals, because if you don't understand what's happening, you don't get paid, right? You don't get a tip. And so when I got into the computer industry, I kind of translated that need for customer service into interacting with the different people that I had to work with, reading the body language, reading the signals, understanding what makes them move, understanding what they may have fear against, or what those agonies are, those pressure points, those pains. And so sometimes you don't speak. Sometimes it's really just listening. And I know that's an abused term where you said, listening is the term a lot of people use. But the reality is you have to understand the conversation before you can start going forward, right? And so I find a lot of times where people are very disruptive, they're not listening to what people are doing. I call it talking to each other or talking at each other, but not talking to each other, right? And there's a big difference between those terms.
Yeah. So tell me more about that focus on customer service, because it doesn't always come up in the tech space. Is this something that you discovered at a certain point where you hit a roadblock and said, how do I get through this? Or has this always been with you? Was that always clear to you that customer service is
I tell you, it's kind of funny. My first role in the software world, I was a support analyst. So my job was to answer the phone, listen to what was happening with the customer, and I would bring up the software on screen to try to diagnose what the problem was, almost real time. And we were measured by how quickly we were solving the problem and making the customer happy. And I remember one time the owner of the company, it was a very small company, we built small business accounting platforms for the convenience store industry. And I remember the owner of the company came in and he goes, he said, you're one of our top guys that handles the support. You get great interaction with the customers. You really listen to them, really solve them. But where are all the problems coming from? Because we can't keep having all of these different problems. And I basically told him, I said, look, that's not my job to point out which software developer is having the issues. I said, my job is to really help these consumers get them back up and running as fast as possible, right? Because that's our face to the outside world. That was like on a Friday. And on a Monday morning, I come in. I usually there about 7:00 in the morning. On Monday morning, when I came in, the owner of the company was already there. I sat down behind my desk getting ready for the customer to calls in, because convenience stores open up early on. And he goes, oh, no. He says, you're not doing this anymore. He goes, you're over there. And I'm like, well, what's over there? He goes, you're going to head the development department, because I fired the head of development.
Whoa, okay.
So by being focused on what was the issue, which was customer satisfaction, right? As opposed to software development, the business grew, but we also improved it. So that was my first take of it.
Yep. So what's the general takeaway from that? Awesome story. But what's the general takeaway for any tech executive from that? Is it look for the surrounding areas? Is it expand your sphere? Tell me where you see.
You really have to, and this is also an overused term, you really have to understand both sides of the coin, right? you have to make sure that you understand, regardless of who you're talking to, you have to understand where are they trying to come from, right? And usually what that is, and I wrote an article about this as well. Let's say that you have somebody that comes up to you and says, I want you to produce this report for me. And what's your first instinct? Great. You just run off to go to produce the report. Well, what did you do wrong? You didn't ask the question. What are you looking to find in this report? So what happens is you spend all night working on a report. Maybe you're going to a board meeting. You send the report out, and what always happens? There's always somebody that reads ahead in this report. Next thing you know, they're firing off questions. You're completely derailed from being able to do your presentation. You fall back on your heels because you're trying to compensate for this verbal assault on your document, right? Now you've completely lost train of thought of what you were trying to do. Whereas in the beginning, if all you had done was stopped, confirm what the individual was looking for, where were they coming from, you could have missed all of that bad situation, right? Yeah. And that's what I try to do. I try to understand the dynamics, not just the people that are involved, but the systems that are involved. And if you understand the larger picture, it just makes it so much smoother.
Yeah, yeah. So looking for the other, you said the other side of the medal or the other side of the coin, right? But looking for the other perspective in there.
That's exactly right. Because unfortunately, the human language is, the human language is a difficult language if you stop and think about it, right? Because I can say something, I don't know what you're thinking at the moment that I say something, and that may cause a reaction back. That's the other one that I find is don't meet a reaction with a similar or more aggressive reaction, because what's going to happen? It's going to become more aggressive, right? It's going to spiral out of control. Somebody has to remain that calm, that civility within that conversation in order to get past whatever it is that's causing the dialect to get out of control, right? And that's really what you have to understand in leadership, is you have to understand that everyone is different, and you have to be able to understand that individual when you're having that conversation. If you have multiple people in the conversation, you've got to get it to some common language, right? So that everyone understands what's happening. And you need to make sure by looking around the room, look at the body language, look at the eyes, look at the conversation, listen to the tone to make sure that it's going properly. Because if you see one person is not in line with the conversation, you need to pause. You need to make sure that everybody gets back to the same level playing field before you carry that conversation forward.
Yeah. Great point, especially if it involves making a decision afterwards, right? You want to
100%.
People are on board. Yeah. Let's take another look at your leadership journey and look at some other areas. I'd be curious, what were some areas or what were moments where you were surprised, where you went into a situation, a leadership situation, you thought you had an idea, you had an expectation, you had a plan, and worked out completely differently?
It's kind of funny you say that. This goes back a number of years. I won't actually mention the company, but I had gotten to a point where I was too confident in myself, right? I was too confident in people that were working with me. What happens when that happens? You get a soundbite, you get an email, you get a voicemail, and instead of taking a step back and finding out the circumstances around that snippet of information, you react, right? And in a situation, I did react. It created a little bit of chaos that we had to recover from. But I learned from that moment on that no matter how big you think you are or how smart you think you are, you still have to act the same way. You still need to pause. You need to think. You need to take a deep breath. You need to make sure you have all of the facts. You need to make sure you understand the situation or the circumstance before you respond.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the situation, right?
Very easy to rapidly fire back. And what causes that is that you become too busy, right? And you don't understand how to balance out your day. That's the other problem that happens is you become so distracted that and people are coming to you for assistance. And instead of you doing the reaction, what you really need to do is turn back to the individual that's coming through you and go, what do you think we should do? Give me some solutions. Let's talk about them. Let's work together to come up with a solution. Instead, your first reaction is they're coming to me to help. And in your dynamics of wanting to help, you react. And I had to learn that the hard way.
And jump at a solution possibly, or go into some advisory consulting mode instead of spending time
That's
figuring
correct.
out what. Yeah,
That's correct. And the value of allowing them to pause, right? That calms them down. If it's a reactionary moment, it gets them to calm down. It gets them to think. If they feel more inclusive that they can make a decision. So that allows you to deflect certain things so that you're not wrapped up in every single minute of the day firefighting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The way you describe it reminds me of something that I think it was Carl Jung who said this. Something along the lines of there is a gap between a trigger and our reaction, and in that gap is our free will. And what I hear you say is expand the gap. Make this gap bigger so that there is more room for that reaction, for that thought through reaction.
Yeah, it has to be, right? I mean, you've got to be able to do that. I mean, I had one individual tell me, in most cases, I know you've heard this one as well, is, just take a deep breath and count to 5.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Just stop for a minute. Because what that allows you to do is that allows you to run it through your brain thought process. Okay, why are they coming to me? What is the situation? Did I miss something somewhere? So it gives you a chance to really just sit there and understand the dynamics before you fire back at something.
Yep.
And sometimes what I've done, where it's an email that I'm trying to respond to, I'll just go ahead because I'm angry. I'll just type up the email, then delete it, right? Just to get it out of my system, right? Because sometimes that's what you want to do. You want to vent, right? And sometimes that works, right? Whereas you just get it out of your system, so it clears your head because you got that anger out of your system. And now you can go, okay, now how do I really want to respond to that? But be careful, don't hit send.
Yeah, maybe take the recipient out first.
Yeah. And those auto save features stink in that scenario. So you gotta be careful. But that does help too, right? Because what you're doing is you're releasing that anxiety, that pressure, so that you can think. Because again, that is human instinct. It's that fight or flight, right? Your instinct is to respond the way you're being attacked, and that's the wrong answer.
Now, we've talked about past leadership experiences. I would like to take a quick look at today, where you are today. And I don't mean this in terms of organization, title, position, or projects. I mean this still in terms of leadership development or your own growth as a leader. What's an area that you're focusing on at the moment? So when you look at all of the skills that you need, all of the competencies, all of the leadership tools that you have, what is your main focus area at the moment where you feel like there is most growth, most opportunity?
What I'm focusing on today is, here's the big challenge that we face today, right? AI adoption is moving very quickly, right? And what I am finding in the organizations that I talk to is our power of thinking is disappearing. These tools are replacing people's thoughts, people's creativity, business creativity. And so what I'm working on now from a leadership perspective is helping people understand, how do you keep a human in the loop as you progress with AI? Because the value of AI is to help you. It's not to replace you, right? It's to help you be more creative, do faster research, right? Some of the things that you used to do in the past that were very labor intensive, very manual, AI can do those automatically, right? They don't require a human to sit there laboriously typing something, right? And so what I'm trying to understand now from a leadership perspective, sorry about the noise in the background, is how do you bring those two together so that you don't lose that intelligence? Because remember, AI is pattern recognition, it's training, et cetera. The concern is, are we approaching a point where creativity is going to disappear? Right. And that's what I'm working on now.
I think that's an enormous concern, and it's true for others, but I notice this with myself as well. The temptation is always there to take a quick look at some AI tool and see how it works. How do you push back against that? I imagine the same urge is there for you, right? Just to throw something into an AI tool real quick and see what comes out. How do you fight back against that?
The way I fight back against it is I take time to jot down what it is I'm trying to do, right? So I get thought out on paper. I get creativity down on paper. And what I'll do then is I'll use an AI instance. I use several of them at a time to actually handle the formatting,
Yeah.
making sure grammatically it's correct and so forth. So I use it as an expert tool, but I don't use it to replace what I do,
Yeah.
right? I just use it to help
Yeah.
that from a perspective. Like maybe want an image created, right? I'm not good at drawing, right? I need an image created, fine. I'll use a prompt to quickly generate an image for an article. If I need to expand on certain criteria, I don't want to have to go do a web search and go find the information. I just use a quick agent, say, hey, look, I need this summarized, right? Boom, done, right? That's where I find value.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Let's project forward into the future and look at a crystal ball, as foggy and murky as it may be. If we were to have this conversation in a few years' time and we talk again about leadership, Marty, what do you think might change in how you look at leadership, but about your own leadership especially? So if you look at your own evolution, what do you think might be different in a few years' time?
That's a tough one. Because because the technology is growing so quickly. I think where I see myself down the road, it's more, again, it's that parental guidance, right? I think I've been in well over 16 different industries, right? And if you stop and look at those industries, I think you could package them in different bundles. And those bundles are based on how much resources they have access to, whether that's financial resources or skill set resources, right? And so where I see myself is still helping people from a high level understand those dynamics of what they need in order to scale and grow that organization. How do you get through that glass ceiling? Every company along their journey hits a glass ceiling at certain points, right? They either hit it in a financial aspect, or they hit it in a market aspect, or they hit it in a resource aspect. There is always some constraint. There's always some pinch point that prevents them from getting over that glass ceiling into the next level, right?
Yep.
And what I see myself doing is being able to help those individuals, help guide them to understand what leadership is needed when to get through that glass ceiling, right? And I find that I'm refining that the more companies that I talk to in this fractional role. I find that I'm expanding that from a horizon perspective to understand, how do I achieve that? How do I get past that, right? Because that is the most difficult question to answer. And what you see from a knee-jerk reaction standpoint is, what is the first thing they do? They start cutting. They either cut a resource or they cut expenses. They don't invest in growth. What I like to tell people is you have to invest if you want to grow. And what is that, right? Is that investment in people? Is that investment in technology? Is that an investment in science? What is that helps you get over that next hurdle, right? And I see where I start to formulate that for my criteria. This, as we were talking earlier, that's why some of these articles that I've been producing, that's what I kind of try to get people to understand, is to see those dynamics, understand what that future looks like, and help them get past that.
Got it. Yep. Now, let me ask you one last question and then we'll land the plane here, Marty.
Okay.
When you look at other tech executives, what is something that you think they're doing not quite right? What is something that you are seeing and you notice many others don't see it, or they might head in the wrong direction there, or they do something that's not quite there?
The challenge that I see is there are still a fair amount of tech executives that think that their role is support, right? That's not true. If you stop and think about it, the role of a technologist or head of technology is an enabler. Your job is, because you have total visibility of what's happening within an organization, right? Because you're the curator. Stop and think about it.
Yep.
So your job is to really be that enabler to help them make decisions of what they can aspire to. It doesn't necessarily mean technology. It could be a process issue. And what you don't want to do is fall into the pitfall of what I call the gee whiz technology, which means that you're bringing in technology for the concept of bringing in technology. You really need to understand the ROI associated with what it is you're delivering from a technology standpoint, that enables the business to move itself forward.
Yeah.
And that's where I still see in some organizations where, as I said, it's a support function, not an enabling function.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really a call to other tech executives to level up, right?
That's right.
That's what's
That's
in
right.
there, really. Yeah.
That's right.
Now, before we say goodbye to the audience here, I would love to pull in a plug for the articles that you've written. Do you mind sharing where we can find them, Marty? Tell us where we can.
Yeah, so I'm a partner with THG Advisors. THG Advisors here in Atlanta is made up of about 30 to 40 different fractional CIOs and CTOs. More than 45% of them have won awards, technology awards. So if you go to THG Advisors website on LinkedIn, you'll find the articles. I try to post one on leadership every day. I think in the past year, I think I've probably pushed more than 250 articles out there. So I really do try to help people understand the different dynamics from a leadership perspective. I try to give a good framework and situations where people can really comprehend the situation there. But yeah, take a look on THG Advisors website out there, or look me up. And certainly if you have a question directly, hey, just reach out on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer.
Awesome. Marty, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you in the conversation here. And
thank you, Joseph. It was great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome. To everyone else out there, make sure to like, subscribe, and come back for our next episode of the Top Innovator Series. And until then, keep your brain cells active.